Let me just say that I've been here at Mercyhurst now for this is my first year as a full-time professor. And what I do in my classes, and all the people on the panel have had classes with me, they will attest to, I start off every class that I have for the first time giving a background of myself. Not that I think I'm so amazingly interesting, but I have lived a life less ordinary, and I do represent the kind of faculty we have here at Ridge College. So normally I also have them memorize these things, but I'm gonna keep you from having to do that, Brianna. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize it. But I'm gonna do it very quickly, and then I'm gonna talk about why I'm here. Once again, my name is Peter Correa. I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 1948. I immigrated to the United States when I was fairly young. Grew up in Florida. It ended up going to William and Mary initially. And after 2 years at William and Mary, two events happened simultaneously in my life. I ran out of money and motivation at exactly the same moment, dropped out of school, and they were not upset about me leaving. I joined the United States Army as an enlisted man in 1968, getting ready to go to Vietnam, and I made a pact with my maker that if he or she let me live through it, I promised to come back and be a better student and hopefully a better person. Along the way, they figured out I was comparatively educable, so they offered me an appointment to West Point instead of going off into the wild blue yonder. I took that, and be very candid with the operative word was free, because it was something that I could do, and neither one of my parents had graduated from high school. So I ended up going to West Point in the summer of 1969. At exactly the same moment, Woodstock was going on to my immediate north. Needless to say, I did not make it to Woodstock. My hair was much too short. My tether was very, very limited. I made it through West Point in 4 long years. They were not the best years of my life, but I learned how to learn. And hopefully I also learned how to become a leader. That parlayed me into my military career. And as you can see, I'm a Ranger, and that's not a Texas Ranger, a New York Ranger. This is the kind of Rangers that rappel out of helicopters or jump into enemy lines. And so I went to that class as well as airborne school and all the other things. And if any of you are veterans, thank you for your service. I thought I was going to stay in the Army 5 years after graduation because that was my commitment, but I ended up staying 24 years. And I ended up having a marvelous career that included travel all over the world. But my students have heard me say this, but I'm married to this glorious woman for 46 years, and I've moved that woman 28 times. And I promise I'm not in the witness protection program, but it is something that created a life less usual. And by that, it meant I ended up going to grad school, got my master's in financial management, had a utilization tour right after grad school back in the late 70s, in which I started my intelligence world. And I had a job at the National Security Agency. Back in 79, for any of you that might have looked at it historically, NSA was a quiet place, big, but quiet. So I ended up going to NSA, had a fascinating time and career there during the Cold War, at which time they also then sent me to the United States Army Russian Institute in Germany, where I once again became part and parcel of our war against the Cold War, so to speak. And that got me deeper into the intelligence community. And then I ended up going with a series of assignments to include Forces Command, where I looked after all of the Americas, spending a considerable amount of time in Honduras and Panama and Guatemala. And then I also ended up going back to West Point as a gray-haired colonel as part of their academic and staff. And so once again, I went full cycle, came back to the academy. And as I always say to my students, I liked West Point much better during my second incarceration, because the first was despicable. It was not fun at all. The second was nice because I had by then a marvelous wife, 2 children. And at West Point, you weren't allowed to have a mustache or a wife or a horse. So when I went back to West Point as an officer, I had a wife, I did grow a mustache, and I had a Great Dane. So I got the equivalencies of that. But along the way, I decided then to retire from the service in 1996 as a lieutenant colonel. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know how to spell lieutenant colonel when I started this odyssey. But that made me get back into higher education And I had a series of great adventures teaching. And what I do teach is what I call the facilitator of your learning. So what you're going to see in this particular exchange is going to be a way in which you leverage your knowledge by leveraging your experience. Because in the word of Siddhartha, a wonderful book by Hermann Hesse, he differentiates between knowledge that you get from a book, wisdom that you get from experience. So with that being said, if I could have the next slide of what, so what, now what? Ladies and gentlemen, plain and simple, this is our battle cry in intelligence. We are constantly peeling the onion of the human experience in order to get the kind of information necessary to answer those three questions. And it's not enough just to do the what, it's the peeling of that onion to get to the so what and the now what in order to provide the decision makers with an informed decision. And this is what's exciting. And once again, every one of the people that you're going to be talking to in the panel, which are the superstars of this show, trust me, they will demonstrate to you the fact they are peeling that onion and they're figuring out the what, so what, now what. If I can have the next slide, please. This is the big four. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Drop the mic. This is the hot stuff. Regardless of the organization, I don't care whether it's Mercyhurst University, the United States Army, or Alcoa, the leadership of that organization is challenged to manage these four assets, resources. One is people, human capital. We have to have an understanding of what is the human capital doing and what they're capable of. The second one, which is that wonderful rendition of a house, that's equipment, things, cars, anything that's not consumable, equipment. People, things. Three is money. All due respect, regardless of whether you're working for Alcoa or the National Security Agency, you're going to have to understand where the money is and where it's going. And fourth, which is the most modern of this foursome, is data. It's information. Ladies and gentlemen, if you effectively manage those four resource types, you have the keys to the city. And that's what we learn here. And if you probably say, okay, oh, and by the way, you'll hear my students refer to me as Colonel. I go by Colonel with my students. So I will tell you, I've known some of these folks. This is my third year teaching here. And some of these were my first year students. I will think they will attest to the fact I'm not just fired up for this presentation. This is the way we roll here. And I'll also say to each and every one of you, if your vision of higher education is to sit in a 300-person lecture hall and have death by PowerPoint, sage from the sage lectures, turn off your screen, run. This is not the place for you. This will not be fun for you. Now, but if you want to get engaged, if you want to pull on that rope of learning and be the facilitator of your own learning, stay tuned. We're on the right track. Have the next slide, please. Okay, what is intelligence? Hey, folks, we could have a whole course on this. But once again, in the true world of the, let's call it the national strategic world, information gathered within and outside the United States involves threats to our nations as people, property, or interest, concerned with the development, proliferation, and use of weapons of mass destruction and other matter bearing on the U.S. national or homeland security. Ladies and gentlemen, since 9/11, radical changes in the intelligence community. And we're still painting that moving train. And that's where it gets really exciting, because these students that you're going to be meeting today are part and parcel of the new world order of intelligence. And you'll hear from their dialogue that they're already into the game. And once again, experiential learning leveraged by technology. Next slide, please. Okay, once again, this is stuff you can obviously ferret out of the catalog, or you can just email me or Andrea or anybody else, and we can talk about this. But these are the various majors. And once again, they're dynamic, but they're also they're not mutually exclusive. They're very, very complementary to one another. I teach a course right now called Business Intelligence. And initially people say, oh, business, wait a minute, that's like accounting or financial management or whatever. Trust me, and I'm sure my panel will attest to the fact it's much more than that. But once again, it gets back to that big four of the stick person in the house and all that stuff, because that's what we have to do. Those are the majors. Next, please. Possible career paths. Oh, good question. Ridge College. We are fortunate enough to have an amazing man who is the father of this college. And Governor Ridge was a governor. He was also the first director of Homeland Security. And he is part and parcel of this particular school. And that's why we're wonderfully proud of calling it Ridge College at Mercyhurst University. Great question. These are the possible career paths. And once again, this is just a small snippet of the various jobs. The reason I put these on is that very often when people talk about or think about intelligence, they just think about the big ones, the CIAs, the FBIs, the NSAs. Trust me, there is a plethora of other jobs. There are 18 within the intelligence community of institutions that are absolutely viable. And you're going to hear from, I know, for example, for Samantha, she had a marvelous internship with one of the lesser known intelligence agencies, but nonetheless important. We also, next slide, please. Before I introduce the panel, let me just wrap up a couple things with this. The reality of the kind of things that we teach, especially in competitive or business intelligence, is in addition to the agencies, all of the corporate America now is very, very, very engaged with business intelligence. Because once again, the reality of the real world order is such that we need to know how businesses are doing. And then very often one of my first questions I ask to students on first day, and all you ladies and gentlemen will remember, I'll ask what the most popular last name in the world is. And very often I'll get the Smiths and the Jones and the Williams and whatever. Well, it turns out the most popular last name in the world is Chang, by the simple fact of population. There's 1.4 billion people in China, as opposed to 330 million here in the United States. The reason I do that drill is to get people not to be myopic, not to say there's anything wrong with the United States, but we're not the whole enchilada either. There's over 8 billion people on the planet, and it's imperative that we know what's happening on all 8 billion of those folks. And very often I'll also say, after that, I'll say, okay, now that you've been enlightened about the globalness of this, what's the most common first name in the world? And I'll get by then I might get a Lee or maybe a Jose, but it turns out it's Mohammed. And to be honest with you, and once again, this is not anything other than facts, I don't think there's a whole lot of Mohammed Changs, which means there is groups of people that aren't on our radar that need to be. If that excites you to say, hey, Colonel, I'd like to peel this on you, then this is exciting. This is viable. And it's literally ripped from the headlines. But the overarching concept, before I turn it over to the panelists, is what I want to do, and I'm pleased to have most of the faculty, many of the faculty here sharing that, is it's not just enough to learn, but what you want to do is practice your competence, your confidence, character, commitment, and the balanced engagement of thinking, acting, and influencing. So along the way, you learn how to do critical thinking. You learn how to make sure that you're making the informed decisions and making sure the analysis is correct. With that being said, what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. And what I would ask you to do is, they know that they're going to give you their name. They're going to tell you where they're from. They're going to tell you their major and their focus. And they're also going to tell you about the experience, not just the experience in my class, but they're all their experience, to include especially that thing called internships. And specifically, we are wonderfully blessed with the Center of Intelligence and Research Analysis and Training called CRAT, which is an unfortunate acronym with the rat part, but it's amazing. This is where people like, and I'm going to start off, Samantha, if you don't mind, I'd like you to start off giving your spiel, and then you can pass the baton accordingly. But once again, listen to this lady and listen to all these folks, and to include CJ, because these folks are doing it and they're in big bites. So Samantha, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I am Samantha Strom. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I'm a junior double majoring in intelligence studies and criminal justice. I'm also part of the 4+1 program at Mercyhurst. So I'm doing work towards my master's degree during my junior and senior year in criminal justice administration. I came to Mercyhurst because of the intelligence studies program. It was such a unique program that I hadn't heard of anywhere else in any of the colleges I looked at. And I always knew I was interested in something with like government, law enforcement, analysis. So this kind of combined all of it, and is hopefully going to take me to where I want to go. Do you want me to talk about my internship right now? Okay. Oh, Colonel, you're muted.
Yeah, please do. And here I want to give a little bit of an introduction,
Okay.
but that's fresh from the, and I mentioned to you, today I enjoyed a marvelous lunch with the two people that Samantha worked with this summer. And I will tell you without question, I could not have been prouder. And so with that being said, Samantha, take it over.
Yeah, so this summer I had the opportunity to intern for the United States Coast Guard Sector Buffalo Intelligence and Enforcement Divisions. So this was an application that came through Mercyhurst through Frank Razone. Mercyhurst enjoys a nice relationship with the District 9 Coast Guard, and they always enjoy getting interns every single year, and we're trying to expand this relationship as well. So hopefully, if you guys choose to come here, this might be an opportunity that you can take advantage of. So there I was able to use a lot of my experience in Intel and through my communications Intel class to put it to use writing reports, going on ops with the enforcement specialists, and actually seeing the work and the stuff that we learn in class be applied to my internship. It's not just something you learn anymore, like in high school. You're actually doing stuff that you're going to use in your careers and in everyday life. So it was really awesome for me specifically because I'm interested in both intelligence and law enforcement, to see the analysis that I was doing at my internship being applied and used in the enforcement aspect as well. So there's internship opportunities for everyone. Any kind of like area field that you're interested in, we'll find something for you in the Intel program. And it's definitely really good for networking too, because not only did I get to meet a lot of people from Coast Guard and all the other military divisions, but I also got to work with Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, Homeland Security, and FBI. So it was a really great experience overall.
Thank you, Samantha. Before I pass the baton on to the other, I just want to also amplify the fact, I was comparatively savvy about intelligence when I got here, but I will tell you, this whole relationship has shown me a whole other world of the Coast Guard. And I've had good relationships in terms of the military, and I did some work with the Coast Guard, but I never totally understood the comprehensiveness of their intelligence. Remembering, ladies and gentlemen, the Coast Guard is every place there's water, to include the continental United States, to include Hawaii and Alaska, to include Puerto Rico and all the Samoan Islands and all those. And just think about, they have 40,000 people, both uniformed and non-uniformed, to take care of all that. Remember, that's in issues related to drug addiction, human trafficking, everything. And we're on the Great Lakes right here in River City. And bottom line is, all due respect, there's a lot of bad stuff going on at times. that we have to be mindful of. Now, to have Samantha, who I had taught previously, and having her come back after her relationship and her interaction with them, and also just to say, the very first person I met after getting here in August was the admiral, the director of the intelligence, came here because he wanted more of us. And now, if that doesn't say something positive, then I need new battery chargers. But thank you very much, Samantha. With that being said,
can I ask, sorry, Colonel, before we pass it on to the next student, Samantha, can I ask if you felt well prepared and were you confident walking into that internship?
Good point.
Because you actually were just finishing the conclusion of your sophomore year, where many students don't actually even consider applying for an internship until that summer between junior and senior year.
Yeah, so obviously I was a little nervous going in as a sophomore, thinking that I wasn't very prepared, but sophomore year in the Intel program, you would take what's called the Communications Intelligence course. And that is probably one of the most helpful ones that prepared me very well for this internship. We learned the exact ways to write in Intel, like the style, how we should talk to decision makers, and how to brief them. So I definitely got to use those skills and put them to the test when I was briefing decision makers and all the command staff, which was still terrifying, but it's a really good experience. And I was definitely prepared from my studies at Mercyhurst.
Excellent. Thanks, Samantha. And I think that's one of the things that Mercyhurst University really prides itself on. Some colleges and universities may not allow you to take major specific courses until your junior or senior year. At Mercyhurst, we want to expose you to your major fall of your freshman year. We want to make sure that it is a good fit for you. We also, as the Colonel kind of indicated, feel that knowledge without application is useless. So we can teach you the information, but if we're not allowing you to put it to use, is it going to resonate? When you need to eventually put it to use in your career field, will you know how to do so if you've never had an opportunity to practice it before? And again, I think intelligence studies does it extremely well on our campus. And I think you'll kind of see that theme as you are introduced to our remaining student panelists today.
Yeah, excellent point. And once again, I want to add the fact is with the students, and not just in my classes, but in all the classes, they are encouraged to create what I call the electronic portfolio of their work. So the bottom line, all of my deliverables, they'll attest to, are projects and presentations and whatever. They're real things that they can leverage and use forever because it's their work. And this is what we totally support for the entire 4 years of the matriculation process, for them to gain that skills, gain the confidence, but also have proof of their capabilities. And I think that really adds value to them. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over. Liz, would you mind chiming in?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Kennedy. I'm a junior in intelligence studies here at Mercyhurst. I'm from Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and I first heard about the program in an offhanded conversation with my dental hygienist because, like a lot of people in our major, we're long attested binge watchers of shows like Criminal Minds and NCIS. And that's how a lot of us want to get into work like that, because we see where work like diligent research and intelligence collection can be applied. And then you come here and you realize realistic applications of that. So with that being said, I found that there are so many opportunities once you actually come here that you don't realize. Sam mentioned Frank Razone, also Brian Fuller are two people that will be saviors once you come here to find application of your work. You can get into CREP projects. Like I was in one my freshman year, we were under an NDA, so, but we were able to actually apply intelligence work. And Colonel, do you want me to talk about Pfizer right now? All right, yeah. And Brian Fuller, actually, when I was applying, I took several of my products that I had used in past classes. One of them that I actually recently applied to an internship for from Colonel's class, where you create realistic deliverables and applicable intelligence products and give them directly to people that are making decisions on who is going to get these internships. And that's how I got an internship with Pfizer this semester. And that has been a really interesting opportunity because it gives you the perspective of business and how much the lines are really blurred between that and national security and criminal justice, because the process is the same. There are different applications in every sector, but really what you're trying to get down is to, like Colonel said, peel the onion and find out where threats are coming from and how you can address them. And a big part of that is social media. And with that being said, I think I'm running out of my allotted time, but I think that going forward, if you guys are really interested in finding open source intelligence, this is the place for you.
Well said, Liz. And once again, can you imagine, here it is in the middle of this pandemic, and here we have Liz working with Pfizer. And once again, that's that's amazing that we have the opportunity, and she does it amazingly well. And also, what's really fun about the class that I particularly teach right now, and Liz is she was in there this morning, but the reality is I can tailor it to the headlines, for example, or some targets of opportunity. For example, we have a great opportunity coming up next week where Abbott Laboratories is coming here to give us some briefings and whatever. So what I did was I wrapped their final project around Abbott Laboratories so that when they go into these sessions, they're going to know more about Abbott Laboratories than some of the people that are going to be briefing, by virtue of the fact the open source capabilities is so vast and they know how to do it. And that's, if you can tell it's fun, it really is fun. But thank you, Liz. CJ, you're on the clock.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm CJ Williams. I'm from Rochester, New York. I am an intelligence major. I also have a minor in the psychology of crime and justice. I also play football here, so I'm a little unique here on the panel. As I play a sport at the same time as being in the intelligence department, which tends to be a little bit rare. My process of getting to the intelligence department is interesting because a little bit different than most. So I was mostly through recruiting for football. I was dead set on being an engineering major. So I loved problem solving. And then when I got my offer from Mercyhurst, I was looking into majors and I came across the intelligence department, and I was looking at stuff like, did I really want to be a business major? And I figured that I want to do something unique. I didn't want to do something basic. And I love to problem solve. And the intelligence department is really the epitome of that. As we saw earlier, the what, so, what, now, what's problem solving. Opportunities at the intel department are great. The colonel is a legend. That kind of stuff has been a huge help for me. I have not gotten to do an internship yet like the others because I've had some stuff with football come up. But this summer, I have an interview with the FBI coming up on Monday. I just heard that today. I have also applied for a handful of other agencies within the intelligence community that I can't disclose because a lot of them you get put under NDAs. But I can attest to the fact that you 100% use everything that you do here. A lot of the agencies, when you apply, they request a sample product. In the class that Samantha was talking about, communicating intelligence, I use my product from that class as a sample product for these agencies to look at when they're looking into hiring interns. It's a great resource to have, and I have multiple. If I need multiple, I have a dozen intelligence products that I've created over my time here that are really useful resources when you're applying for internships and jobs in the future. That's really all I got.
CJ, thank you, CJ. And I will tell you, once again, I think the capability of a Mercyhurst to have the student athlete such as CJ, who are both students and athletes. They're not going through education light as an athlete. Would you attest to that, CJ?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And once again, that's the helpful part, because he had a wonderful, he continues to have a great football career, but he's also in class. He's, as we call it, he's pulling in that rope with all the rest of us. And thankfully, as large as he is, he pulls it really hard, come to think of it. But seriously, that's the experience. And thanks so much for sharing that, CJ. And yes, sometimes it might get in the way of an internship or so, but it will play out well in the long run, because I will tell you, part of our strength at Mercyhurst is our student athletes, as well as our students as well, because I think it does give that balance and that sense of commitment. But thank you very much, CJ. With that being said, Brianna, come on down.
Hi, everybody. My name's Brianna Kurtz. I'm from Erie, PA. I'm a junior this year, but technically I'm going to be graduating this time next year. So I'm graduating a semester early. And I am an intelligence studies major and a criminology minor. To kind of just talk about some of the experiences I've had a couple so far. I completed an internship this past summer with Erie Insurance, and I worked as a data analyst for Erie Insurance. So that was really interesting because it gave me a different side of the intelligence agency. I kind of got to dive more into like the business part of it, which I just had completed Colonel's business intelligence class the semester prior to completing my internship. So that really helped because some of the different concepts that we talk about in that class, I was able to utilize in my internship. And also what Sam and I think a couple other people on the panel mentioned as well. I used a lot of stuff from the communicating intel analysis course, and I was able to just, they really teach you well in that class about how to write papers and how to write concisely so you can get your point across in fewer sentences. So I really utilized that in my internship, and just some of the skills with like Excel and stuff like that.
Is everybody frozen? Or just,
I was going to say, I'm okay, but I don't know if just Brianna is.
Let's just be Brianna.
Until we get her back, Colonel,
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to ask you before we ran out of time here tonight too is, what characteristics do you think make current students a good fit for this program? Is there anything our prospective students should be doing right now that might make them more successful as they enter your department?
I would say without question is to fine tune your sense of inquiry. You know, be thoughtful about what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Not because, once again, I think we have a tendency to sometimes hear things, but we don't always listen to what's being done. And once again, to get to that point of, you know, for example, we had a session just the other day where I came up with some acronyms that I thought everybody needed to know that we don't know, like the World Bank or the IMF, or then we went into what the difference between a deficit and a debt was with respect to the government. I say that only because it's important as you read and you look and you think, is to be thinking about the world and in that whole rather than in that myopicness, and have that sense of inquiry and be willing to have the aggressive, and I mean aggressive in a positive way, the what, so what, now what philosophy that you're constantly asking. And once again, that whole issue of why. You know, we have the inquiry with respect to some of our analysis is nothing more than a series of whys. So I would encourage people to what I would call work on their game. Be thoughtful about what you're reading, how it might impact on it, and be looking to how you might connect the dots, so to speak. And I also want to mention something, Brianna, if she doesn't come back, for anybody that doesn't know Erie, while she is a hometown young lady, she also went with an internship with Fortune 500 company, the only Fortune 500 company that's in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is Erie Insurance. So this is a big operation. I would also say, to her credit, she also works. I happen to know because I'm a shopper. She works at Wegmans, and if anybody knows Wegmans, it's the best place to buy food on the planet Earth. And she's been working there for a long time, and she's a marvelous asset to Wegmans as well as to Mercyhurst. But this is the kind of student we have. So if you have that sense of inquiry, or if you can work on that and get that fireball going, this is the perfect place. Now, I will tell you, it's not a place to be complacent, because once again, you have to produce. And I think all my students will attest to the fact I'm famous for the end of the class. I will say, Okay, Samantha, what's your takeaway today? And bottom line is they need to speak, and they need to speak well and practice the act of communicating. And so, yes, work on your game.
Fair, good advice. Colonel, one question that just popped up is from Isabella in our chat, and she was wondering how many people get approved for internships. Could you talk a little bit about the internships and how students find them? I know people kept mentioning Brian Fuller and also
Yes.
Frank Razone, and those are common names to us, and we rely heavily on them. But unfortunately, some of our prospective students might not recognize those names.
Okay, and I'll give you the quick version of this. Bottom line is I would call those two assets, and I'm talking CRAT and career services, to be the uranium of this. This is what drives it. Bottom line is all of our students, I know they'll attest to the fact, career services doesn't start just at the end of the rainbow. It starts at day one, where they interact with the career services. They're looking for opportunities, whether it be for student employment or whether it be for internship. The same on the CRAT side of the house. You know, I hate to say position heal thyself, but yes, you have to push to get it done. Not push in the point of trying to make something happen that can happen. It just means you have to be motivated to make it happen. And every one of these folks that have been on internships, is that about it, Samantha? You got to play to win, correct? Yeah, and I think that's the thing. But it's there for you. On top of that, ladies and gentlemen, what's really fascinating is, for any of you that aren't familiar, we also subscribe to database information that we pay for for the student, and it gets you away from the world of Google and Wikipedia. You can drive into some very high level, sophisticated databases that'll give you information you can't believe. And that is what I think is the important thing, is the longitudinal aspect of the career services, the CRAT, that goes in parallel with every year of your matriculation. That's what makes the difference. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and I would say too that some of our students end up doing more than one internship, or they end up working for a company remotely even when they return to school. If for some reason, CJ is carrying a Division II athletic load on top of his academics, many of our other students have part-time jobs like Brianna, or they are involved in many clubs and activities. You can do all of those things while still being successful as an intelligent studies student. And if for some reason you might not get an internship as early in your career at Mercyhurst as you would have hoped, again, the classroom application is teaching you what you're going to eventually need to go out on those internships or to start your first career.
Yes.
Chris just asked, are there key technologies or software in intelligent studies work?
Samantha and Liz, speak to that. What all of you learned and been able to leverage?
Yeah, so we use a lot with just basic Microsoft Suite stuff like Word, PowerPoint. We use those basic softwares for a lot of projects and presentations. But we also use things like I2 Analyst Notebook. So those are softwares that, like the FBI, they use that. And you're able to make big link charts to connect a lot of different people, a lot of different places. If you're looking at a criminal organization, you can also use it to make a mind map or a flow progression for counterfactual scenarios, just things that we would talk about in our classes. We can use it to make a big visual and just try and visualize the projects that we're doing. And sometimes you can even print them. I know in the 178 class, that is, you'd be doing a country study, you can get your big link chart printed. And I definitely have mine printed, and it's hanging on my wall proudly at home. Very proud of my work.
As you should be.
But that's just one of the examples that we use.
Tommy also just posed another question in the chat. He was wondering how gaining experience in problem solving actually would allow him to succeed in an internship. We talked a lot about problem solving. So do you mind kind of jumping in and maybe giving your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, so
yeah, please.
Like we went over in the beginning, the Colonel's battle cry for intelligence is what, so and now what. A lot of what we do is you receive a problem, and you need to figure out what the problem is, and how can we fix it. And that is what your intelligence product entails, but you go in much more detail, obviously. And that the ability to do that, the deep analytical level, is what is needed and what helps you succeed in these internships. I'm gonna give you an example. For my my freshman year, one of our intelligence products, I looked at Qatar. It's a tiny country in the Arabian coast. And I looked at where U.S. aid could be allocated for that country, where it's most needed, how that relationship could be beneficial for us, and maybe what the downfalls of a relationship with them would be. So stuff like that would help you succeed in these internships. And not only that, the stuff that you learn can be applied in many different areas. It's you're learning the ability to solve these problems and think structurally and analytically. That can apply to many different areas, not just it can be business, it can be national security, it can be law enforcement, it can be applied in a variety of areas.
Yeah. Well said, CJ. And I might also add, I think what we also do in layering this, and it's not just in my class, is in the process of also learning how to critically think, we also put people in teams. I mean, and once again, very often people come to Mercyhurst initially with a bad taste in their mouth about teams because they haven't been well managed, so to speak. But we have expectations right at the very beginning where everybody knows they have to get involved, otherwise they're not gaining the learning experience. And I will tell you, I think almost everyone ends up getting a different feeling about the power of the team and how the team actually helps learn, because it's very often said, you really don't know anything until you have learned how to teach it. And very often that allows the student to be part of the team so that they can synthesize that learning so that they really do learn it rather than just memorize it.
Thanks, Colonel, for expanding on that. And CJ, thanks for your insight into that question as well, too. I know we are quickly approaching the end of today's session. We also promised that we would go ahead and allow anybody to audibly ask a question. If you would like to unmute yourself and audibly ask a question, please feel free to do so now.
We do have a question saying, is being a U.S. citizen by birth, but also having a foreign passport or foreign citizenship to another country a barrier to getting a job in intelligence?
Run it by for me. I mean, once again, I'm far from an expert on that, but having been born in Brazil, I have some of the same challenges. But what is your current citizenship?
So they live in the U.S. and are born in the U.S.,
Right.
But they also have a foreign passport or another foreign citizenship as well.
And how about you? Do you have a U.S. passport?
Oh, they're writing this in. We'll see.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
No,
Colonel,
no.
Angela is actually asking on behalf of another prospective student. She was privately messaged that question.
Oh, understood. But once again, if they have a U.S. passport, then it's moot. Then it's not an issue in terms of what the other origins are. So I guess that I would, in order to answer that question, I'd need more detail, and it probably would be better we could talk about it offline. And I'd be glad to.
And again, to the student that posed that question to Angela as well, in that chat, you'll notice that the Colonel did share his email address. His
Yes.
offer to continue this conversation offline is very genuine. So please feel free to go ahead and provide him with a little bit more detail, and he'd be happy to go ahead and expand on that discussion with you. In addition, some of our current students also shared their email addresses in the chat as well, too. So again, if you would like to continue to kind of hear their story, please feel free to send them an instant message or an email as well, too, and they'd be happy to go ahead and chat with you. Isabella did pose one last question. Sorry, Colonel. What's the earliest anybody would be able to apply to an internship? Are there any limitations?
To my understanding, I think traditionally, Sam's scenario is that's probably the first time. I mean, I'm not the first time of anybody doing it, but that would be the time after you've gotten at least a course or two under your belt in intelligence. So I would say she's the prototype of probably the earliest that I would suggest it. Sam, would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I've had some friends in my criminal justice major who were freshmen that got internships like this. And I know someone that was accepted as a freshman to the Coast Guard internship as well the year previously, but because of COVID, they weren't able to do it. But honestly, you should start applying to internships as soon as you can, as soon as you're ready and you feel like you're prepared to do it, in order to best represent yourself and this university. Just make sure you're prepared yourself and try and apply to anything you can.
Colonel Sophia also just posed a question in the chat. How much do you feel COVID has impacted the Intel major and career paths?
How much is it impact? Well, I think COVID obviously has turned much of the world upside down, but I think it's made it more important rather than less important. Now, having said that, it hasn't made it easier, but in the words of Jack Welch, simple but not easy. This is not easy stuff, especially in the world of COVID, but it's absolutely imperative. Just think about, we were talking about it actually with Liz talking about Pfizer, was just think about the importance of us understanding all of the pharmaceutical companies that have been doing these studies, just how did that play out? And once again, it's opened up a whole nother world of intelligence importance by virtue of the fact that this is critical stuff. And while the Cold War was critical, this is something that's totally universal. And it has, I think, impacted on it, not in a negative way. Now, having said that, I will be the first to say it, going through it when we were all in our fuzzy slippers and going through the screen, we made it work. Now, I like our world now much better, but this is not a bridge too far. And speaking of which, the one thing I wanted to add before we get cut off with time-wise is with respect to my email out, if any of you on the line would like to set up and just shoot me an email and say, hey, Colonel, how about you and me and my parents Zooming sometime and talk about this? Cool beans, sign me up. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere for during the holidays. I would love to Zoom. And I think it can be a very good dialogue and a conversation. I hope that answers the question. But I think it's just one of those things of when you have a challenge like, the community will get to that. And if you look at the intelligence community, it includes such things as the Department of State. It includes such things as Homeland Security, as well as the Treasury. So it's all involved with this in various and sundry ways. Yeah.
Katie posed a question in the chat too, wondering how many students are accepted into Intel each year. Our average freshman class is usually about 650 to 700 students annually, probably see roughly about 3,500 applications submitted, probably accept somewhere between 70 and 75% of them. I would say the incoming Intel freshman class sometimes is as large as 120 students. Sometimes you might see a smaller class at 70. So it fluctuates a little bit. But university-wide, our student-to-faculty ratio is right around 14:1. You're probably not going to sit in a class much larger than 20 to 30 students ever. As you get into some of your higher level classes, and they're very discussion-based, you may be in a room with 8 to 12 students. That is not unheard of at Mercier. As the Colonel said at the beginning, if you are looking to hide in a classroom of 300 to 350 students, Mercier's is not the fit for you. If you want to walk into the classroom and see the Colonel and see your peers and have somebody say, how is your day? What's your plan for this class? What are you going to do next term? What are your ultimate career goals? Those are discussions that people are going to be having with you continually. Again, sometimes it's uncanny how friendly campus is. The doors are constantly being held open for you. And people genuinely are interested in your well-being. Our faculty feel their successes are ultimately judged by your successes. I'm going to answer, I see there's one last question that just was posed in the chat too. And please know that we could continue this conversation probably for the next hour or two, but I do definitely want to be cognizant of the fact that most people signed up to be on here for roughly 45 minutes and we've started to exceed that. As the Colonel mentioned, if you would like to set up an individual appointment, whether it be virtual or in person, please know that those opportunities exist and we would be happy to go ahead and help you with those. No two college searches are exactly the same, and we want to make sure you have the information you need to go ahead and decide whether or not Mercier is a great fit for you. I think all of our students on here, the Colonel, my colleague Angela, and I all believe Mercier is a wonderful place to live and learn. You can have the total college experience here, but we want you to find that out for yourself as well too. And again, sometimes that's through an additional virtual conversation. Sometimes it's through an opportunity for you to come to campus, sit in on one of the Colonel's classes or sit on in one of his colleagues' classes. Whatever you need, please know that we're here and we'd be happy to go ahead and do that for you. It looks like the last question that was just posed in the chat is there a limit on how many people can apply to a program? And is there a deadline? We operate on a rolling admission cycle. So if you are a senior, we are in the height of application season right now. Most of our applications begin to be submitted right around the middle of September. With that being said, because we operate on a rolling admission cycle, you do not have to submit your application by a certain deadline. The earlier you submit your application, as well as that supplemental material that we would require to review your application, the earlier we can get you an admissions decision. Simultaneously, the folks in my admissions department are actually packaging financial aid as well too. So we are truly one-stop shopping. Our goal is to ease that transition from your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year, and make it as smooth as possible as you come to Mercyhurst. I think I can speak on behalf of Angela as well as my other colleagues in admissions when I say the most enjoyable part about working at admissions is getting to know students and their families very well and helping them navigate that process. I also saw applied as an undeclared or an exploratory student and just wanted to make sure that they didn't miss out with the program because they are now very interested in this. If you would like to go ahead and change the major that you submitted your application on, simply reach out to your admissions counselor. Again, Angela will put her contact information in there. While she may not be your actual admissions counselor, we can go ahead and get that email in the right hand. So again, feel free to reach out to her. She can go ahead and share that information with you. And then Sophia said she's in 11th grade now. What can I do right now to help myself to potentially get accepted? My challenge to you would be continue to do very well academically as you finish your high school career. Be comfortable being in an uncomfortable position. You know, go ahead and challenge yourself a little bit. And as the Colonel said, you know, listen to what people are saying, listen to what you're hearing on the news, and then go ahead and kind of process that information. The more you read, the more you write, probably the more successful you're going to end up being in this program. Most of our students that come to Mercyhurst and probably any other college or university setting have been very successful in high school. If for some reason you come to Mercyhurst and or any other college or university and something isn't clicking, please remember to be a self-advocate. I know that the faculty as well as our current students at Mercyhurst are happy to help people along the way, but we're not mind readers. So if we don't know that you need help, sometimes we can't offer that help. So again, be a self-advocate for yourself when you do go to colleges and universities. But if you are still in high school, especially as a sophomore or a junior, get involved, because again, it's no longer enough just to be a good 4.0 student. We want to go ahead and make sure that students are academically prepared to come to Mercyhurst, but that they're also going to contribute to the overall student body at Mercyhurst. With that being said, I wish everybody continued good health. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Enjoy the upcoming holidays. We hope to see you on campus soon. And if we can't do that, definitely join us again in the virtual world. But carpe diem and have a great night.